49ers showing up big for Arik Armstead at his event, gets the key to Sacramento. I want to highlight a lot of the great things Arik Armstead's doing off the field. Talk a little bit about Armstead, the defensive tackle group now with Javon Hargrave on the field. 49ers OTAs, Trey Lance, highlight throws, hits and misses. Should we even consider any of it in OTAs? All that and more coming up on today's live Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to all the everydayers. If you're not an everydayer, make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Croc about to get real, taking off his glasses because he's about to come with some smoke right now. I do want to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. I want to start, Croc, with Arik Armstead. And, you know, we've spent so much time and we put our scouting hats on and throughout the offseason talking about free agents and draft and all the prospects. And there's still more rookies and undrafted free agents for us to cover here. And by the way, go back and listen to all our recent episodes breaking down all the 49ers draft picks. And Arik Armstead, I mean, he's been up for Walter Payton Man of the Year. He's been doing a lot of things, especially back in his hometown of Sacramento, California. And he had an event. And by the way, you can find an article on all of it from Jennifer Lee Chan at NBC Sports. And it's the Armstead Academic Project's inaugural kickoff for the Kids Gala is what happened in Sacramento. And so that's really cool. And I just want to highlight the stuff that Arik Armstead's doing. He got given the key to the city, which is really cool for all the work he's been doing, and seeing all the like teammates and even owner Dr. Jed York, right? The big dog in the 49ers organization. He's kind of silent and behind the scenes because his son, Jed York, is the CEO and running the show for the family. But Dr. Jed York was there at this event. Teammates like Trey Lance, Juwan Jennings, Patrick Willis was also there, made the trip and supporting Arik Armstead as well. So I just think that's really cool. And I wanted to highlight that today with all the things Arik Armstead is doing off the field.
No, he's awesome off the field and in the community of Sacramento. He's actually been really awesome with my son as well. My son's mom's husband is really good with Armstead's brother. So they've hung out with Armstead and stuff like that. And he always shows my son a lot of love. So really good dude. The interactions I've had with him in person, he came out we were doing a camp at Edison High School in Stockton. Armstead came out there and was great and interacted with everyone there. But the work that he does in the community in Sacramento far outweighs anything he's able to do on the field. And he's had a terrific football career and he's had some really good seasons for the 49ers. But his impact off of the field, man, it's really tremendous. And I think that the Sacramento, like they feel that impact.
No doubt. Yeah. What do you think we should expect this year from Arik Armstead? By the way, Luke in the chat says, good on Eric, local now Northern California, man. Yeah. And I love seeing all that. SJ Sharks fan 39 in the chat says it doesn't get talked about much, but the off the field culture of the 49ers under Lynch and Shanahan has been amazing. They're back to being a class organization. I think it's really important, man. I think it's super important. And most of the hits the 49ers have had in the draft is because of that. Talking about character, how guys are going to come to work, right? How they treat people off the field. We talk a lot about how awesome the Harbaugh era was and how good the players are. But off the field, there were some issues back in the day with some San Francisco 49ers. And it was all a class organization, from the Bill Walsh era, from the Eddie D era for the most part. And so it's important and it makes for good players. It makes for a good locker room. And I do think that you're right there, SJ Sharks fan 39, that you got to give Lynch and Shanahan a ton of credit for the character aspect of what they've done with the organization. And obviously Arik Armstead was here even before that.
Definitely. I think everyone in that locker room pretty much kind of epitomizes what the 49ers want to stand for. And I think Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, they're kind of the ringleaders of that whole thing. They learned a lot from some of the misses and maybe the character not aligning exactly with what they want, and not just from good guy standpoint, but just the mindset that they want their players to have, and they've built an entire roster around guys that have that type of mindset. So it's been really cool to see how it's played out. You always want like maybe that one guy that's a little dirty, and you have it, you got it, Dre Greenlaw. So they still have kind of those feisty guys that are going to toe that line of being disciplined, but overall, there's enough of the guys that do everything exactly how they want to do it. You can have kind of that Dre Greenlaw, and I think he creates a nice balance with the rest of the roster.
Yeah, well, I mean, they can play bully ball on the field with the best of them too, and then be like good dudes off the field. And there's a balance there. And even with Drake Greenlaw, he'll come in a little late at times. Just seeing him full haymakers trying to knock the ball out. By the way, 100% accuracy on those hooks he was throwing. And he got flagged for it, but he was hitting the ball, so he was hitting the dude. So got on him. And there's a story about Greenlaw with remember somebody came out. It was like somebody who was the father of his daughter went to school with Greenlaw in college, and they were like
out in Arkansas.
Yeah, in Arkansas, and they were in the same dorm or something as freshmen. And there was something was some dude was creeping on this guy's daughter, and Dre Greenlaw, her classmate, took care of the situation, make sure she got home okay from a party, and just that kind of thing. And so the 49ers do have a lot of that. And Spy Nick Danger in the chat says, I was unimpressed with our draft until I got to know them. Now I'm thrilled. And you look at this draft class, and it's like the 49ers have their gold helmet designation. They drafted two of those guys where it's all about intelligence, smarts, character, work ethic, and all of those things. And they didn't have a high-end athlete draft for the most part. And we went through this draft class, and we kind of highlighted how there's not a lot of athletes in this class, but almost every scouting report is like, this dude's a team leader, hard worker, grinder, all of those things. So the 49ers got that. They might not have found superstars in this class, but they found guys who fit the culture for sure.
We talked a lot about Jair Tick Brown, and just last week it was reported, Brandon, now you throwing it out there, dude's had 3-4 interceptions, and another one dropped. He could easily have 5 interceptions right now through the first part of OTAs. And it's not so much that they're stat keeping, but just showing that the impact that these guys are making. And someone called me out because there was a write-up on Brown and how well he's doing right now, and the guy was like, Croc, you gave him a D-, you clown, or something like that. And I'm like, if I gave him a D-, it wasn't the player. And I think that they got a lot of really good players. This has always been the value, and I thought we did a really good job verbalizing the value versus the player, and maybe when we would have gotten. But at the end of the day, right now, those guys are on the team, and you can see kind of where they all fit in different ways.
No doubt. Okay, more on that aspect. And we got some questions in the chat. And by the way, hit us with some questions here. I want to talk a little bit about OTAs, but we're going live here. It's summertime. The sun is out. It is your show as well as ours. So let us know if there's a certain question or topic you want to get into about these 49ers as we approach training camp here, getting through OTA portion of the offseason. Phase 3, I believe it is. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500 back. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. You can bet NBA playoffs. You can bet NHL playoffs. Of course, Major League Baseball and NFL futures. Tons of ways to bet on the NFL. You can go bet that week 1 line right now. 49ers favored by 3 on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1. You can bet week 2, 3, 4 if you want to at FanDuel. You can bet on future Super Bowl champions, future Super Bowl MVPs, future rushing leaders, future sack leaders, coaches of the year, rookies of the year, all of it at FanDuel Sportsbook. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Now's the perfect time with the NBA playoffs. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. I do want to talk about, it's so like the one thing, the most important part of finding a great player is obviously you need the talent to be there, but how they are wired, I think is really important. And I think the 49ers have tapped into that. They found some star players in the draft. One of the aspects about this 49ers draft, which gives me pause still, is I don't know if they found stars, but when you watch these players, you see how they play and the kind of character they have, the kind of work ethic they have, the demeanor they bring to the field. I think they got some guys that'll compete for jobs and potentially stick. Now, the difference is when you look at George Kittle, when you look at Fred Warner, those guys had all of those attributes too, but they're also elite level athletes. And so you still have to have that too. So when you go look at George Kittle, you go back and look at his scouting report. He's like, okay, blocks his butt off. Wasn't really used much in the passing game, but elite level athleticism, height, weight, speed.
High weight speed, change of direction. His recon was crazy, like
all
40 time. I think he had the second fastest 40 time to Evan Ingram, who was a 4.4 guy at tight end position. So, like high level. Then, you talked about Fred Warner. I mean, we're talking about a 6'4", 235-pound fluid linebacker who was able to play out in space in the secondary. So just really different type of athletes, those guys.
Absolutely, yeah. And those guys would have had the highest relative athletic score out of anybody the 49ers drafted this year. And it's not even close. Drake Greenlaw, he didn't test as well in his 40 time, but he had the fast GPS time, remember? And obviously when you watch him play, you can see him fly around the field. And so you do need some athleticism, and it definitely helps you be a really good football player or even a great football player instead of a good football player to have, a high level of athleticism to go along with being smart, being tough, and all those things. An interesting one this year will be Colton McKivitz, Croc, because he's the guy. Chris Forrester. By the way, the more I hear Chris Forrester talk, because Chris Forrester had his stuff back in the day, like he's in Miami, and go look it up.
He was having a good time, a little too good of a time.
South Beach is a little much maybe for Chris Forrester. So go look that up if you don't know what we're talking about. And
I was just in Miami. I actually just flew back in, today. I did not partake in those kind of festivities.
There was an NFL player that got arrested in Miami this weekend.
Oh,
were you there? Were you there for that?
I did not see that. I was on Beach Street
Antonio
Drive.
Antonio Callaway, is that a real player? I think that's who it was. I think it was just like there was an arrest warrant out for him. It wasn't like he did something crazy. So I don't. But anyway, Chris Forrester has come to the 49ers. He was behind John Benton as the assistant offensive line coach, really resurrected his career and rehabbed himself. And I mean, I love hearing him talk about offensive line. I saw some videos of him doing, explaining, some of his blocking schemes, and you hear him talking about his players, and it really breeds. I mean, he's got to breed confidence in his players. He bred confidence in me just hearing him talk about his players, McKivitz and Spencer Burford, and those are two big ones for the 49ers, especially Colton McKivitz at right tackle. Colton McKivitz, one of those gold helmet guys, really tough player. The 49ers waived Colton McKivitz, Croc, after his second offseason. He didn't get claimed either by another team, but the 49ers brought him back to the practice squad, ended up activating him again later that year, and then he's been on the team ever since, and now is going to be the starting right tackle in place of Mike McGlinchey. Now, his testing numbers were awful. They're really bad. But, tough, smart, and you see him mix it up, and I don't know if that athleticism will hold him back at all, but he's big and tough. And so that's a really interesting one right there, because his scouting report would fit right in with a lot of players that the 49ers drafted in this 2023 class. And so I'm excited to see what Colton McKivitz look like, because he's got all of the confidence from the organization. They didn't sign anybody to go over the top of him. They didn't draft any tackles at all. In fact, they're a little thin at offensive tackle, in my opinion, if there's some injury bugs that hit that position. But man, Colton McKivitz, they really believe that he is the dude. And they might have even traded McGlinchey last year, believing that much in Colton McKivitz, which is pretty wild. 5th round pick, not a high-end athlete as far as starting offensive tackles go in the NFL. Most guys that move like him and test like him go inside. And he's got the job all to himself.
No, there have been guys that have been cut and brought back and cut and brought back, and then all of a sudden they turn into a legit starter. And I think a lot of it's just figuring it out, and the development curve for some guys is just different, right? I mean, there's been stories about like Johnny Randall back in the day, and I think he was like an undrafted type guy, or Harrison, the defensive lineman for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was cut several times before turning into like the superstar that he was. So, because you get cut and you have to go through that adversity, doesn't mean that you can't be good. It's just, man, figuring out how to be good. I think when you kind of go back and look at this draft and some of the guys that they did get, I don't think you go into it expecting any of them to be stars, which typically you don't when your first picks come at pick 87 in the third round. But the 49ers, do they need a star? If a guy becomes a star, awesome. But I think where they're at right now is like, man, can you just play a role? Because we have these other stars. Talk about all the guys on offense where they're just really loaded. You talk about the guys on defense where you got one of the best defensive players in the NFL, if not the best, and Nick Bosa. Then you got Hargraves, and then we talked about Armstead and how Hargraves is going to really help Armstead probably be even more productive from a sack total number and things like that. Then you look at the next level and with Fred Warner, with Dre Greenlaw, and the outside that Travarius Ward, and what you're going to do with him at the cornerback position, and Hufanga, he was an all-pro. So you got enough guys. Can you just figure out where these guys fit in and just have a role? And if they develop into a star player, awesome. Again, the traits part doesn't scream superstar, but hey, we just saw Hufanga be an all-pro, so you kind of never know. That's why I don't like to put ceilings on a lot of these players.
What do you think it's going to look like? Because I wanted to talk a little bit more about Armstead on the field. What do you think it's going to look like at D tackle with Javon Hargrave, and then now you have Javon Kinlaw, former first rounder, who's essentially a backup there now. And there are reports that, and I haven't really seen much of it, but that Kinlaw is even lighter than he was last year. I wonder how they'll move. Kinlaw is even lighter than he was last year. I wonder how they'll move Kinlaw around, and if they're going to even have some plans to have him play a little big end, even because he was like playing nose last year. Like, I don't really know what the plan is with Kinlaw, but the fact that they signed Javon Hargrave means that I don't think they know what the plan is with Kinlaw, or at least, or they understand that maybe he won't give them much, if at all, at that position. But man, Hargrave next to Armstead, he'll be the best player that Armstead has played next to since DeForest Buckner, when he had his best season, his 10-sack year in 2019. But since then, he's only had 3 sacks, 1.5 sacks, 2.5 sacks, and 2 sacks in the last 4 years since that 10 sack breakout. I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. I was going the way. So he had 3.5 sacks in 2020, 6 sacks in 2021, and then let's see, and no sacks last year.
Yeah, if I had to guess kind of how they would do it, I'd assume that Kinlaw would start in base, and you'd see the Armstead at the big end spot. And then when they go into like more of a sub package or obvious passing situation, you see Armstead slide inside, Kinlaw come off of the field, and then hopefully a Drake Jackson come in off of the edge, who, right now you're hearing a lot of things about the way he looks. Now it's just, okay, being able to play at that size and, be what the 49ers need to be, as far as the development goes and whatnot. But, even outside of him, some of the other guys that they brought in from free agency who they can get to come in and be productive on that edge spot. So, again, Kinlaw in base with Armstead on the outside, and then Armstead slide inside in sub package.
I like it. And maybe Kinlaw not taking on doubles as much, more of a 3 technique with Javon Hargrave playing the 1 tech, right? And then big end.
And again, we're not the big like schematic people, on this draft, and I won't pretend to be, but you think he's a 1 tech? Because he's a penetrating pass rusher.
He was straight up nose tackle. When the Steelers drafted him, he was like playing 0 technique, straight up nose. And like his production took off when he was allowed to not take on double teams as much with the Eagles. But I think with the 49ers, he would clearly be the best, stout interior run defender on earlier downs. And you would have him in that 1 tech, which just shaded off the center a little bit. And because I don't think Kinlaw's just, he's too sort of tall, and I think he gets off balance a little bit too much. I don't think he kind of suffers from a similar thing that McGlinchey suffered from on the offensive side of the ball, where guys can just get under him a little bit if he doesn't win initially, especially with Kinlaw. Like Kinlaw wants to just like knock the hell out of you to start the rep. And if he doesn't win a lot of those reps where he doesn't just initially beat you or overpower you. And so I think he does have a problem with leverage sometimes. So maybe at the 3 technique, that'll be a little better spot for Javon. I think Javon Kinlaw's best position would probably be that old school 3-4 as a defensive end, the old 5 technique defensive end, just because of his length and power.
Yeah, that probably would be. But even then, at the size that he's at, it's all about like figuring out how to win in the way that you have to win. Like think back to Richard Sherman, right? Really long cornerback, not the twitchiest of guys, not the fastest of guys, but he just mastered being able to play with whatever limitations, quote unquote, limitations that he had physically, how to work around that, whether it's just be, hey man, I'm going to be, headier. I am going to be able to, read route concepts, be able to jump those, understand that, and I'm going to be playing a step ahead. So even if I'm not the fastest of guys, having an understanding of what could be coming, I can play at a higher level. And I think for Kinlaw, is understanding, okay, you're 6'5", you're a big guy. How do you have to play to win? And then try to really overemphasize that in your training. So we talk about him getting a little too high. All right, well, overemphasize playing really low. So at least in the games, maybe you're not quite as low as how you train, but it's much lower than the guy that was getting blown back in that NFC Championship game. So, 49ers, you got couple guys that you probably can talk to, whether it's DeForest Buckner, if you reach out to him, because I'm pretty sure he still has that good relationship with Arik Armstead, who's a 6'7", 6'8" guy in person. Like, dude's a monster. Like, ask him what he does. Like, why is he still really good against the run and be able to penetrate and do those things and kind of hold off and not get blown out of there. So, talk to these guys, man, and work with them, get with them in the offseason. Maybe he is, but I think that's something that really help him.
All right, get in the chat a little bit more here next, Croc. And I do want to talk about the quarterbacks a little bit and maybe some overreactions from everybody based on a few OTA reps that are out there on video next. Thanks, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day. Shout out to the everydayers. Tomorrow on the pod, we're going to talk more 49ers, more OTAs. We got a Winky Wednesday episode coming up this week. We've got more tape that we're grinding with some of the undrafted free agent rookies on the 49ers and tons more fun stuff coming this summer for you on Locked On 49ers. Make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And also check out the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Myself and former NFL scout Matt Williamson breaking down the entire league every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to go back to a topic we were talking earlier, Croc, and Kenny says, speaking of like all of the high character players the 49ers have brought in, he says, do you think this is blowback from Reuben Foster? They seem to emphasize character a lot in the draft now. I think they've always emphasized that, but they just kind of took more chances before. And they knew that there was some stuff with Reuben Foster, but they're like, I think they were a little naive at the beginning. The whole, and look, it was a first-time GM in John Lynch. It was a first-time head coach in Kyle Shanahan, and the first time either one of them had really come close to having say in who a team is going to draft. So they see the talent on the field, and they're like, yeah, give me this guy. And based on talking to him, and because Reuben Foster, when you see his interviews, when he seems like the nicest dude. He's always smiling. It seems like he loves to play. The way he plays on the field is like, this guy loves ball. How could this guy be bad? But just make some weird decisions off the field, and it came back to haunt him. And so I think they probably talked to him and like, well, this guy's too good. Let's bring him in. And then the same thing happened in that same draft in 2017 with Joe Williams, the running back. Remember he wasn't on the draft board at all for the 49ers. They were not going to take him. He was not on their draft board. Red flag character stuff. He's not going to put in the work. And that was the word on Joe Williams coming out of Utah. And he bounced around. I think he was at 3 different schools at some point in his college career. But Kyle Shanahan really wanted him. He loved the tape. He's like, I'm not going to be able to go to sleep if you don't draft Joe Williams. So what John Lynch do? He called up Joe Williams and talked to him. So, you going to come in? You going to work if we draft you? And of course, what's he going to say? It's a job interview. How many times have you lied in a job interview, Croc? And he's like, yeah, of course, coach. I'm going to work hard. I love ball. So you draft him, and guess what? He doesn't play a snap for you ever. So right. I think they've learned to really trust what other people are saying about the player that have been around him from those colleges, and not so much trust what a guy's telling you he's going to do.
Right, and even then, you go back to them asking Nick Saban about him, right? And I remember hearing Nick Saban live on television. He's like, "Look," he used the word candy striper or something like that. He
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, if you want a candy striper or whatever that is," it was something along those lines. It was something that I never heard anyone use that term. I'm like, maybe that's some old school down south term that they use for somebody that's just not, a perfect civilian, but said he's a great football player. And I think we saw that, right? Like just terrific football player on the field. You saw him fly around, make a lot of splash plays, but the injuries and then the off the field stuff kind of got him out of there. Did the 49ers put more of an emphasis on it? I think everybody tries to toe that line, and I think the 49ers have kind of tried to go more towards the good character. And I do think learning from that, which was their very first draft, I would assume that they had a big part to play in how they construct the roster now.
Raymond says good people make mistakes all the time. It does happen. Nobody's perfect. I think candy striper Croc is like a goody two shoes. I think is what he meant by that. Is like if you're looking for a candy striper, maybe this isn't your guy. But if you want a good football player, yeah. I think there was somebody else that said Nick Saban said something about you maybe have to have someone with him, kind of helping him out. Like you give him make sure you're looking after him, and he'll be okay.
There were a lot of people that said that the 49ers got kind of duped by Nick Saban. I'm like, how did they get duped by Nick Saban when I saw him say this live on television?
Right, exactly.
So I'm pretty sure he said the same thing to them. He's not going to go to them and be like, oh, yeah, no problems. Off the field, won't worry about him. Great football player. But then be on NFL Network and be like, hey, if you want a guy that's like this, he ain't that, but he's a good football player. So I think he was upfront with them. They just thought, hey, we can fix it. And John Lynch, and I understand, I always feel like I can fix people, and you just can't.
Yeah.
Not all the time. There are you typically wait on that guy. I mean, think of Tyrann Mathieu, right? Like Tyrann Mathieu got kicked out of LSU. We all saw what type of terrific player he was. Arizona got him in the third round. He's been an amazing NFL player, and you never would have thought that with him coming out of LSU because of some of the things that he had to deal with off of the field.
Right. Yeah, and if you're going to take a chance with a mid-round pick instead of a first-round pick is probably the way to go. You know, the other thing the 49ers have done a lot of is not drafting as many players who were previously injured, especially the last, I want to say 2-3 drafts now. A lot of guys that have played a lot of football games and have not been hurt. And I think that's one of the ways they're trying to combat the injury bug and still biting them. But I think they've definitely emphasized players who have stayed healthy throughout college, hoping that means they're going to stay a little healthier in the NFL.
I wonder what goes into that because we could talk all about how people take care of their bodies and whatnot. I don't think I ever took care of my body the best, and I never missed games. I didn't miss a game until my very last year playing with the San Jose SaberCats, where I had a high ankle sprain more than halfway through the season. That was the first time in my entire life, I'm talking about since Pop Warner, ever missing a game due to injury. So I think some people, they just don't really get hurt. We see the whole, and I don't know how much you pay attention to the I Am Athlete podcast, but Chad Ochocinco used to be on there a lot, Chad Johnson. And he has this whole Ocho versus science thing. And basically it's, look, I work out hard, but I eat whatever I want to eat. I eat McDonald's. I do all this. And Brandon Marshall, you take care of your body. You're all into this science stuff, and you got hurt a lot. You missed a lot of games, and I never missed games. So I don't know really what goes into, just not missing games. Maybe it is just drafting guys that don't get hurt for whatever reasons.
Yeah. Well, look, you, Croc, and Ocho Cinco, guys like you, just built different.
That's what it is, man. Yeah. He said that eating McDonald's, it kind of like built up a callus in his body. So he just that's what he said.
Dude, Marshawn Lynch over here eating Skittles during the game.
Right. He ain't missed much games either.
So really quick, Croc. And this is a topic we can get into a little bit more tomorrow. I want to talk the quarterbacks here, and I do want to get into it a little bit more tomorrow, where we talk more about some of the video clips we've seen and our reactions, and if we even should react, or if we're overreacting to some of the stuff we've seen on video. But to finish up this episode, Jericho has a good question here. He says, real question is, do we win a Super Bowl with Brock or Lance healthy all year?
I'd say you compete for one. It's hard to just say. I mean, come on, man. We're talking about 32 NFL teams, and everybody's fighting for that. And there's like only one team can win it. So I think for the 49ers, the thing that, like, especially now, right? Especially after all those hard times, you know for sure that the 49ers will be in the mix. And I strongly believe that with Brock or Lance, they maybe even Sam Darnold, because of how well coached this team is and how loaded they are, if one of those guys starts all year long, you will be in the mix. Will you win it? I don't know. But you will be in the mix.
I mean, it's just so good for continuity to have one healthy quarterback all year long. But the 49ers are in a position now where, okay, well, if Brock and Lance are healthy all year, that means Brock is probably going to play all the games and Lance will be a healthy backup all year.
Well, I think he's saying if, like, let's say week 1 Trey Lance starts and he starts the whole year.
Yeah.
Or if it's week 1 Brock starts and he starts the whole year. So I think that's all he's saying. Like, if just one of those guys is to start all year, do you think that this is a Super Bowl winning team?
Yeah,
I said that they would compete for that opportunity. I feel like you get to the playoffs and be like, oh, 49ers are rolling.
I'm interested to see year 2 Brock, and it's still kind of year 1 Lance if he actually plays, right? Is like what's this development that's been happening all this time? Like how's it going to look different? Is it going to look better? Is it going to look, does Brock look? It's going to be hard for Brock to be better because we're talking about ways that he can improve. It's hard for him to be better than how they played down the stretch last year, right? And if he comes in and maybe throws a couple more interceptions, maybe the numbers aren't quite as good and the team doesn't win, just lose the game with him at quarterback, which they haven't done except for the NFC Championship game, which he was hurt the whole time. Like, people are going to start, oh, Brock wasn't the guy after all, right? Or like, Shanahan can't coach him up, and we still haven't seen that. We haven't seen a quarterback play better in his second year under Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers yet. You got to go back to Matt Ryan. And, Matt Ryan was a fully formed quarterback already with the Falcons when Kyle Shanahan got there. So that's an interesting question. And
I'm glad that you brought that up because I have a DM here and I have it open, ready to read it. And my girl Ash, she said, Croc, I have a random question. She's having a conversation with someone and she wanted to know what we think about Kyle Shanahan and his offense and if there have been any significant changes since Atlanta. And she says, if yes, do you think that was because he found there to be issues with the offense, so he wanted to change it, or because he didn't think that the QBs that he have can execute the offense the way Matt Ryan did? So I do want to kind of look back at Matt Ryan because I think a lot of people, when you hear Matt Ryan's name, you know that he won that MVP award in the second year. I think a lot of people assume like, Kyle Shanahan made him an MVP quarterback. But if you kind of go back, Matt Ryan was a really good quarterback prior to Kyle Shanahan. And you look at some of these numbers, and I'm not saying that this, equated to a bunch of wins. Clearly, like, some coaches got fired. But prior to getting Kyle Shanahan in 2015, the previous, 4 years, 4,100 yards, 29 touchdowns, 4,700 yards, 32 touchdowns, 4,500 yards, 26 touchdowns, 4,600 yards again, almost 4,700 yards, 28 touchdowns. I mean, and then 4,500 yards before. So, I mean, this was a guy that it was very clear he's a baller. And then he had Julio Jones. I mean, Julio Jones, he was cooking before Kyle. Now, again, Kyle, I think, emphasized. Now, if we want to talk about like a change in the offense, he definitely, ran the ball with the two running backs, had Tevin Coleman, had Freeman. But man, I mean, they were emphasizing Julio Jones in that offense, regardless of having Sanu, regardless of having Turbo Gabriel. All right, it was like, hey, Julio Jones, like, our whole offense is going. He's better than anybody you have, and I feel like that's the part that I feel like he's kind of gotten away from, like having that one, maybe a quarterback that's a veteran like Matt Ryan. Again, when he got Matt Ryan was. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It was year 9, I believe, when Kyle first got, so it's like, this guy's a veteran. It's a lot different. So I do think maybe the offense was different. Maybe it had a lot to do with a veteran Matt Ryan and a veteran Julio Jones, who's one of the best receivers in the league. But also the guys that he's had right now, everybody's so new to playing the quarterback. And then I feel like he has to, like, okay, let me give him a little bit. Dang, he's hurt. Okay, let me give him a little bit. Dang, he's hurt. Instead of being able to be like, man, this guy's an 8-year, 9-year pro who has been already playing at a high level. I can throw the book at this guy. Okay, we're going to have some ups and downs that first year, but year 2, he's going to know what I want. He's a pro. He's going on year 9, year 10 in the league. Got Julio Jones. Oh, we're cooking. I don't think he quite has that. And I think that's why he's kind of changed his offense. He hasn't been able to get into a groove with any young quarterback right now.
Yeah, I think your offense is going to look different when you have prime Matt Ryan and prime Julio Jones. You're not going to be able to do those things with other guys. As good as some of the 49ers players are, it's those guys are, a really good MVP caliber quarterback in his prime and one of the biggest freaks we've seen in a while at wide receiver.
Yeah,
do it all.
Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, right. It's Calvin Johnson. Since Randy Moss, it's been Calvin Johnson and Julio.
Right. I got to throw Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown, is he a freak in his own right? Because because being 5'10", but playing like big, like he did, just going up, doesn't matter. Throw the ball. That's a freakish.
I wouldn't put him in the freak category. I'd put him in the Eric Crocker, Ocho Cinco different category.
Me and Ocho are bigger, taller than.
But you're built different.
Yeah, built different.
You guys were taller, but could move like a little man.
Yeah, okay, I like that.
And Antonio Brown's a smaller man, but he can play like a big man.
Oh yeah, man, dude was good. I hate that the off the field stuff is going to overshadow how amazing of a football player he was, because there wasn't. It was who's the best? Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, and then maybe Odell Beckham for some years in there as well. But it was. Antonio Brown was so good. And now it's just all the weird stuff off of the field. There's a lot of weird stuff. It's really going to overshadow how great he was.
All right, more on the quarterback conversation tomorrow. How much can we put into what we see from 49ers, OTAs, everything going on with your San Francisco 49ers as we approach the 2023 season? We're with you every single day. Shout out to the everydayers. Make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.
Subscribe to this video.